Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. These are the post-fight reviews for the fights that Vladislav Sirenko, Oleksandr Zakhozhyi and Viktor Weghorst had on the Oleksandr Usyk promoted card in Ukraine. And this was unusually dramatic given Zakhoyzhi and Sirenko were facing journeymen. They didn't sort of impress to the level that probably most of us would have expected. Sirenko getting rocked to his boots in the first round of his fight, so we'll get to that. We'll start with him and then on to Zakhoyzhi, who laboured and struggled to some extent, and yeah, it was far more competitive for him than it should have been. And for Sirenko, we'll start there, and Weghorst will be at the end of the video. Pretty uniform sort of victory for him. But Sirenko, this was really interesting. Remember, he was facing a journeyman, a guy called Pavel Krolenko. Sirenko rushes out at the start of the first round, and he wanted to get to work. He wanted to put it on him, but you know, defensively irresponsible, throws the jab out there, and he's not bringing it back. And Pavel Krolenko, as it became quite apparent through this fight, had one weapon, which was the Dave Allen-esque looping overhand right, and Sirenko ate one of those early on. And I've got it here on screen, corner of the screen, so I'm using this under fair use. It's just a 4-second clip, but rocked to his absolute core doing the Bambi dance. I wasn't expecting that, and that just made that fight so much more interesting, because we haven't seen guys like Sirenko and Zakhoyzhi in a whole lot of danger or adversity in their careers, and this was a situation where, you know, he was meant to go in there as a showcase fight, look good, do the number, and get him out of there. But obviously it sort of started off on a bit of a flat note. But he did, you know, rally, he recovered, and he started to get back into the fight. That sort of first round, you know, that was a Krolenko round. Clearly after that he was still landing a number of good shots, jabs in particular. And then after that, Sirenko, you know, recovers, starts dominating the fight. But in some respects, he sort of fought the only sort of fight that Krolenko could win. He was, you know, at mid-range, and also he was right in there at times up on his chest, and it sort of suited him down to the ground. And it sort of would have liked to have seen a better game plan, because it sort of felt like it was the only sort of fight Krolenko could win, the sort of spots that Sirenko was putting himself in, and obviously opening himself up to a couple of shots, and obviously that he ate a big one in the first round. But weird ending to this fight, very weird. So in the fourth round, Krolenko sort of takes the shot, and, you know, on the live sort of action, it was hard to tell, was it a body shot or something like that? But the replay shows, because what happened is he sort of screams out in pain and then sort of backs up and takes a knee. And I thought, is this a knockdown? Was that a left hook? But it was actually a hook that missed the target and sort of hit the wrist area of Krolenko. So after that, the doctor is having a discussion with him for 10 or 15 seconds. And at the time, I'm thinking, was this a knockdown? What's happening? He's getting extra time here. But the replay showed it was a shot that landed on the wrist. But the round continues. It ends. And then they sort of cut back, and it's all over. So it just kind of, yeah, it was weird. It was a bizarre ending to a very sort of interesting sort of fight that Sirenko was starting to really sort of dominate. And I was sort of thinking at the start of that fourth round, it looks like Krolenko is really starting to tire here. Some of the fight might have been beaten out of him, and ultimately he took that out after that weird incident with the wrist. But yeah, he rocked Sirenko to his core. Probably not the sort of thing Sirenko fighting on export in Ukraine, big market. This was also on the YouTube channel of Usyk17. That's Oleksandr Usyk's YouTube channel, 70,000 subscribers there. You can watch the full card there. That's how I watched it. Didn't have to use VPN for export's website in Ukraine. You can catch all the action. It's a massively long card. There's about 15 fights or something ridiculous on there. But yes, Sirenko, that's, you know, survives the early scare to get the win. Not quite as impressive as many of us would have thought, but yeah, I mean, that's boxing. But yeah, hopefully on to the next one, and hopefully he comes in slightly better shape too. At the second career heaviest weight, he was almost 252 pounds. As someone said to me via a direct message on Twitter, it looks like he's been sat down on the couch eating pizza over lockdown. And he obviously didn't think much of his opponent, defensively irresponsible early on, and he almost paid the price. I mean, that was a big shot that he took, and, you know, he did a dance. But on to Oleksandr Zakhozhyi, who was similarly in a fight where he probably should have and could have done better. So he was fighting Konstantin Dovbushchenko, and this was an alarmingly competitive fight, and it was a little bit all over the map, but a tiring Dovbushchenko kept coming forward. In the late rounds, it went 8 this one, all 8 rounds, but Zakhoyzhi just couldn't take advantage. And there were some concerning elements about this performance, because Zakhoyzhi, through the course of the fight, remembering this is a 6'9" guy, he was getting hit with quite a few clean shots. But if we sort of roll through some of the action, just a little overview here, because it was all over the place, this fight. The first round, you saw Zakhoyzhi, who's a good mover, using his length, you know, using the ring, and basically keeping Dovbushchenko at bay. He was not able to really close the distance to any real effect. But as soon as Zakhoyzhi started to sort of hold his feet more in the second round, that's when Dovbushchenko was able to start catching him. Zakhoyzhi just really couldn't stop him coming into the inside and getting some work away. All Dovbushchenko was really doing was just coming straight forward with looping, you know, either a left hook or an overhand right. There wasn't too much sort of nuance to his game. It really was just that simple. But Zakhoyzhi was getting caught. Often he was just going straight back and he was getting clipped. And through the course of the fight, he ate a number of clean shots. Nothing that really troubled him to the point where you thought that he's in trouble here, but there were a few times when the crowd was really starting to get into it. But this was meant to be a showcase fight. You know, Oleksandr Zakhoyzhi heading into the fight 13-0. He was meant to go in there, look good against a guy who was a journeyman. This guy had 5 losses heading into the fight, Konstantin Dovbushchenko, but he showed a lot of heart and determination, and it was evident from the first round that he was better than the opponent that Victor Vikhurst had fought earlier in the night. There was night and day between the quality of the opposition. But still, Konstantin Dovbushchenko wasn't great. He was pretty basic, and a guy with the skill set that Zakhoyzhi does possess and the height that he has, you know, it was a surprisingly, he struggled. There was a couple of moments where you sort of thought, this is a bit more life and death than I was ever expecting this fight would be. It was just a case where he couldn't take advantage of the clearly tiring man later in the fight, but also he was guilty of headhunting. One of the features in the couple of early rounds was he was throwing nice body shots and then coming back with, you know, right hands over the top sort of thing. And he was clipping and catching Dovbushchenko. And the second round, it was relatively competitive. It was one of those ones where you sort of thought he's not taking advantage of catching, you know, his opponent coming in. Obviously, there were some words between rounds, because round 3, probably his best round of the fight. I thought that was the clearest Zakhoyzhi round by a mile. He looked good in there. He'd made some adjustments. He was starting to throw the uppercut more, you know, more body shots and looking good. But after that, it was kind of, you know, a little bit downhill. He went head hunting. Dovbushchenko was just continuing to do what he was doing, and he had moments of success. And at one point he had Zakhoyzhi on the canvas, but it was a slip, and it was a clear slip. It was, his foot came down on one of the stickers, you know, the advertising things on the canvas, and he sort of slipped. But in the moments before that, he was backtracking. He was trying to get out of the way because he'd eaten a few clean shots. But after 5 rounds, Dovbushchenko was pretty much spent, and it was a missed opportunity for Zakhoyzhi to really start going, you know, back to basics, working the jab, because that fell away through the fight. He was really just trying to get him out of there through power punches, you know, to the head, and it wasn't working. He never really rattled Dovbushchenko to the point where you sort of thought, you know, he's in trouble here. A couple of moments where he'd put on a couple of nice shots shots and you thought, is this flurry going somewhere? But it was a performance that was alarmingly competitive, as I say, and it made me sort of think, is Oleksandr Zakhozhyi as further along as many of us thought? I think maybe he needs a few more of these fights in before taking another step up, because on the strength of that, he's going to get beaten at some point, probably before he reaches, top 20 or top 30 level. Not a great performance. I mean, maybe it was an off night. Maybe the layoff has impacted him. Certainly he did look a little bit rusty there, and he himself was blowing a bit hard later in the fight too, and that probably contributed too. But not a great effort from Oleksandr Zakhozhyi in this one. Okay, so the third Ukrainian prospect in this video that we're covering is the talented Viktor Vikhurst, a former top amateur. He was facing a guy in Semen Pakhomov. And this was the situation right from the off. You knew that this was a clear mismatch. Heading into this fight, Viktor Vikhurst 1-0. This guy Pakhomov, you could see he wasn't going to provide much resistance. In fact, in the first couple of minutes, he barely threw any punches. He had the high guard up, and he was clearly looking to weather a bit of punishment from Viktor Vikhurst, who you felt like he could just sort of unleash at any time and really sort of, put the gas, his foot on the gas. But for the first round, for the first couple of minutes, it was pretty sedate. Viktor Vikhurst just easing into the fight, didn't really sort of do too much work, working the jab, sort of pressing forward. Just looked like he wanted to sort of settle in there and wanted to enjoy his work. The final minute of that first round, he started to throw a few more punches, get into it. I was surprised Pakhomov actually saw out the first round. But in the second round, in the first minute or so, Viktor Vikhurst did sort of get into second and third gear, really starting to pour the pressure on a bit more. And the final sequence, it came with a right hand to the body and then followed upstairs to the head. And Pakhomov, he sort of delayed reaction from the body shot. You could see that one really hurt, and he sort of slumped to the canvas. And the referee gave him the count, and he could not respond, or did not want to respond. It was waved off, all over, inside 2 rounds. It was one of these things. It was what it was. We knew that this was going to be a low-level fight for a guy who heading into this was 1-0. So I wasn't expecting too much, and we didn't get too much. And we didn't really get to learn too much about Viktor Vikhurst. That first round, it was pretty sedate. He clearly wanted to. He was carrying Pakhomov. He didn't really sort of put the foot down until the second round. And as soon as he really started to ratchet up his work rate, it was just too much for Pakhomov, as we were probably all expecting heading into it. But yeah, one to watch, a former top amateur. We didn't really learn too much out of this one, except he throws decent body shots and, looking for the right hand. It's hard to sort of critique this performance, but I'm looking forward to seeing him again sometime soon. What did you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.